Hey everybody, it's Alex from Heavy New York. We are at this awesome Coliseum in Westbury, the NYCB, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we are here we are here with Tosin of Animals as Leaders and Generation X. Thank you for your time, man.
Right on, dude.
Yeah, huge shout out to our mutual accountant for connecting us.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't threaten you with an IRS audit, right? That was just a joke,
It
right?
didn't get to that point, but I think he had that in the bag
Yeah.
of options. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad it didn't go that extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah, but thank you so much for your time today. This awesome tour with Generation X, and but a lot of fans are waiting for the awesome follow up to the Madness of Many. Can we be expecting anything soon?
Oh yeah. I don't know about soon. Like we're gonna start working on it soon.
Okay.
I have a thing where I definitely want to feel inspired before I begin a body of work, as opposed to looking at the calendar and being like, oh, it's been, a year or two since the last album. We have to do another album. I'm more like kind of waiting for that wave of inspiration. So we're I feel like I'm like there now, along with the other guys in the band. So we also wanted to do something different. So we've been kicking around some ideas that you guys will eventually, hear about. But yeah, I think literally after this tour, so like, January is when we'll begin demoing stuff.
Which is awesome. What I was always curious about with Animals as Leaders is that you guys have a really distinct sound, like your guitar and your style and everything. So, do you tend to experiment with the making of each record, or do you like to kind of stick with a formula?
There's no preconceived formula, but our styles are distinct, and so there's a thread of continuity in some of the musical ideas and choices you'll hear. But I think each album is different, but also similar in certain ways. So we definitely I don't like repeating myself as an artist. I think a formula is safe and it allows a lot of bands to reliably produce music that meet the expectations of their fans, and it's safe. You don't have to worry about losing fans or taking many risks. And some people just compose in a way that their creative output is just consistent. There's just a ton of continuity between the ideas they express. um, I go through phases where I'm fixated on one thing or another, so I imagine that this next album will be different in some ways and similar in others.
Awesome. Being that your music is instrumental, is it fair to say that that allows your music to be more open to interpretation to your fans? You're not kind of like dictated by a meaning like what some lyrics do?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the idea with the instrumental songs is that it does leave a lot of subjective space for the listener to occupy, as opposed to defining, what they think about with lyrics and imagery. We really like rhythm and harmony to kind of lay that foundation, and then the openness is, I think, really welcome, considering I think music is disproportionately vocal centered.
Yeah, I feel like when you have lyrics that are, especially like, when it's clear cut, like Rage Against the Machine, for example,
Hmm.
it's like there's really no room for interpretation there. But I feel like for your music, but at the same time, your guitar soloing definitely conveys a lot of emotion into it too, right?
Yeah, and that, I mean, look, lyrics are different than, you know, simple writing, because to be lyrical is to have a degree of art to the words you're using, and a degree of subjective space for the reader to kind of, it provides imagery. So lyrics in themselves, I think, are, they do create that space for you to kind of like to go. But they are still words, and so there is a degree of concrete meaning with words. With notes, they evoke emotion, and if you are artful with the notes you choose, you can really evoke emotions that are um, complex or hard to pin down, which I think is really awesome. And it transcends language in ways, because I think, if you don't speak English and you want to connect with, some lyrics, it's tough. But melody, I think it hits us at like sort of a deeper or a different level.
Yeah, one of my favorite bands is Duran Gray, and I can't tell you how hard it is for me to like like I don't speak a word of Japanese,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
like yeah, I'm always wondering what the hell are they saying.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So for you, it's just it's melody and rhythm through the voice, but you don't have that substance of meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, with your guitar soloing, do you like have to hear background music and be like, okay, I gotta work off of this scale and this mode and this key, or is there a time where maybe you come up with like a guitar solo and then like the rest of the band kind of writes according to that?
Usually there's a chord progression or a section, and then I try to phrase and fill that space with what I hear. But I've actually had some sections where I came up with what sounds like a lead or a repeating single note line, and then you build the rhythm and harmony around that, which is fun too.
Yeah, it's really interesting because some like music guitar players they need to like work off. Okay, I got to do the pentatonic scale at this mode or the mixolydian or
Yeah.
chlamydian, whatever it's called. That's a meme somebody made.
Oh my god.
But like, but for you, it's very experimental. There's really no like real theoretical element into it, right?
No, there for sure is, but I don't consciously decide that I want to work in, I want to work in Phrygian dominant or melodic minor. What I'll do is I have a foundation of those scales, but the idea is that in real time, um, I try to choose from that foundation in an artful way that isn't super like intellectual and predetermined. But you do that groundwork of theory so that you have options when you want to be purely creative.
Hmm.
It's the same with language. Like everything you've read and all the movies you've seen, dialogue and poetry and lyrics and fiction and not that all enters your head. And when you go to speak, you're actually pulling from a lot of the things you've read or heard, and so your vocabulary can grow, and that allows you to speak in new ways. But it's because at some point you like sat down and learned new words. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it just feeds your creativity.
Is there any improvising involved too?
The madness of many, like all those solos were improvised.
Really?
Yeah, and they were kind of refined, but like I normally compose the solos. Um, because a lot of our songs are the solo sections are short. You don't have a lot of repetitions to really develop a solo, or I kind of like composed solos. Like touring with guys like Vi. He improvises a lot, but he also stays true to a lot of his recorded solos because they're written so well that they feel like part of the song, not just a departure. And so I've always taken that approach. I mean, John Petrucci is the same way, and a lot of my favorite players they play the album solos live. I'm always stoked when that happens. But I also started to want to break out of that shell. And so in the Madness of Many, there was a lot of sections that we let repeat quite a bit. And so I could actually improvise and develop a solo. Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, one of my favorite Animals as Leader song is On Impulse.
Nice.
Do you have like any memories on how that solo formed? Because
The solo there was, yeah. Honestly, what happens with songs like that is you get to a part. I was working with Misha Mansour, and he's like, "All right, we need a solo here," and so you just let it play, and you become the composer and listener at the same time. And there's a particular lick that the solo begins with that I had been working on, and it's funny because that solo, yeah, the first few bars of it repeat,
Yeah.
so it's actually not really meant to be like a departure from composition. It's actually like just faster.
it has that bridge between like a very chaotic like element and a very organized. I called it organized chaos.
Okay, yeah, that term has come up before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, you get it. It's like that shit. Yeah, that's basically how I do it. Per song, I approach it differently, but I try to make something memorable.
Awesome. Now, one question I was really curious about is with bands like Animals as Leaders or Intervals, Polyphia, Sean, Jason Richardson, like all these guys, I've seen, because, people have put you in like the metal category. I think that came from like playing Summer Slaughter with Cannibal Corpse and
Yeah,
Dylan.
and our music is heavy.
It is very heavy, but what I've noticed, I've seen people like who say, "Oh, I really just listen to video game music, and this kind of reminds me of that." Is it fair to say that that your music can appeal to multiple audiences?
I hope so. I mean, my interaction with our fan base has been like it reinforces that idea that there are people who like jazz or they aren't necessarily into metal, but they like animals as leaders, or you know, yeah, because we try to put enough musical substance in there melodically and rhythmically and texturally to where it doesn't pigeonhole um, the band into one genre or appealing to only one type of listener. Um, and then we have a pretty diverse range of songs. There's songs like On Impulse or Modern Meat or Brain Dance that are like, or Paramexer, it's all on nylon string guitar and it's closer to Spanish classical than it is metal, you know? So Javier and I, as songwriters, are both really like, or as guitar players too, we like a lot of different things. Metal is just like a portion of it. So we try to encode that in our music. So yeah, our fan base is pretty diverse.
Which is awesome. And I just have two more questions for you. Doing this tour right now with Generation X, I mean, this is like a guitar player's dream supergroup with you, Zach Wild, Ingve, Steve Vai. I'm missing.
Nuno Betancourt.
Yep, from Extreme.
Yeah.
Yep, I knew I was missing one. But, all these guitar players, I would say, have very different styles. I wouldn't, Animals as Leaders is different from Black Label Society, which is
Yeah.
different from Extreme. Does maybe playing with these guitar players maybe influence you in a way to bring in some newer elements to your style?
It's funny you say that because we did a U.S. tour, Generation X, in 2016, and that was right as we were finishing the Madness of Many, and all that was left was the guitar solos. Like I needed to come back from tour and complete the solos, and touring with these guys totally turned my ear towards like, Marshall plexi tones and a lot more bends, a lot more blues based phrases, just because you kind of get kind of enrolled in like what you're hearing constantly. And so, yeah, it's definitely an influence. I learn a lot from these guys. I mean, there's things you can put on paper that are learnable, like, oh, use this scale or use this mode. But these guys have been playing at such a high level for so long that touring with them, there's things I'm learning that it'd be hard to put on paper, And it's in their tone, in their hands, or what gear they choose and why. And so yeah, it's been an influence in a very like wide way. So it's always cool to come out here and do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And one other question I'd like to ask you is I've asked this with many artists before, but how do you know when a song is finished?
that's a good question. I think there's a quote that a song is never finished, only abandoned.
Yeah, I've heard that. No, that's with. I heard that quote in art school. I think it's an art.
Okay, so any creative endeavor, there could be very practical or circumstantial reasons as to why you have to like leave it alone. I don't have that problem, but I would say that some songs really write themselves. You just know what comes next. You, for some reason, the song is already available to you. You're hearing it, and you're like, look, it's got to go back to the breakdown, and then it has to have this type of outro, and you just know it. And then some are like, what should we put here? And it's like a laboring thing, and so I think it really changes. The funny thing about that question is that there's the compositional part, but then there's also like, say you're mixing the song and you're like, oh, I think I can make it sound better. You can get caught in a rabbit hole of endlessly improving the mix. So eventually, yeah, hopefully there's a deadline or very reasonable people who are like, bro, it's over.
You have a label to thank for that, right?
Yes, yeah. So that's a funny question, but it's not something I battle with personally.
Yeah, I mean, it's so I can only imagine like Between the Buried and Me. Like, I mean, they have songs that are between 5 minutes and like 40 minutes.
Yeah, and so I don't know that they're having that problem. I feel like they're very comfortable with having like really epic compositions and very dense compositions where they put enough in a song to where they ended because they weren't limited in what they decided to put in the song.
I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time
Right
today.
on.
This is going to be an awesome show tonight.
Right on.
Just so before you go, is there just you're finishing up this tour with Generation X right now? Is there just anything with Animals as Leaders that you like to promote in terms of like the new music or anything like that?
Just keep your eyes peeled for news from us regarding the next album, and you know, I'm doing the Abasi Concepts thing. We have a distortion pedal called the Pathos, and I have some surprises with the guitar line. So if anyone's going to NAM or tuning into that whole situation, there's going to be a lot from Abasi Concepts then. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Most people I've noticed like are picking up like they heard Animals as Leaders and they're like going straight to your guitar rather than picking up that shitty like beginner Stratocaster.
yeah. There's guys going straight to 8 string and stuff. It's very interesting. I don't know that there are many rules when it comes to learning. Well, what I mean is that the traditional electric guitar has 6 strings, but if we took, there are traditions of 7 string guitar in Brazil and in Russia, or, the lute, I think, had like 10 strings, or the Brahms guitar has 10. So there's an orthodoxy that if you begin guitar, it's on a 6 string, but I actually think that, like, it's just a stringed instrument, and that if you get a pure beginner and he has 7 strings on his guitar, well, maybe it's like learning 2 languages when you're a kid. It's like it's fun because you're just learning, and you have the capacity. So yeah, I find it interesting that some people are going straight to 8.
Did,
Yeah.
did you see like the 32 string guitar that was at NAMM last year?
Is that it's like the gent stick or something?
I was just asking them at what point do you just not say fuck it and just call it a harp? You know what I mean?
Well,
I saw Dino Cazares from Fear Factory holding it, and I was just like, I would just take the strings off and use it as an ironing board or something like that.
yeah, there's a lot of available jokes there. I think that was more like a trolling situation because of what you're saying. Like, when is enough enough? But also, in the hands of the right person, I think things that seem ridiculous or impossible to one person are like totally usable tools to another person.
After NAMM last year, I saw Jared Dines with that guitar like every day, like. So,
Yeah, and I think his whole thing is like the intersection between like being a musician and a comedian to a degree, and creating viral content, and he kind of killed it with that, and because you're like, well, when does it end? Like,
yeah, bro, do you even gent?
exactly, and I think he wrote some music with it, so it's kind of funny.
I'm getting carpal tunnel thinking about it.
Yeah.
But Tosin, thank you so much. Everybody, Tosin Abasi of Animals as Leaders and Generation X. Pick up The Madness of Many if you haven't already, and be on the lookout for new music soon. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York, everybody.